Good afternoon, and very good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Welcome to VUEGRAPHY. Alright, how are you guys? Hope you guys doing great. 2023, 1 month passed. We are in the second month, and things are progress, slowly, gradually, but it's good. Hope for the best. Well, today's video is going to be interesting, like always, and the topic is actually, today's topic comes based on certain comments and reactions from people, and I thought, okay, let me make a video about that. And it's really important to share something which not many people, you know, able to understand, and they just share their opinion. Today's topic is about technology comes with price. So that's what today's topic is. So what exactly I mean by technology comes with price? Sorry, sorry, apologies. Well, the technology comes with price. Basically, idea is you can't have everything in your camera or lens at a cheaper rate. Every company who is making, top of the line camera or expensive lenses, they are putting the best of the best when it comes to engineering into those machines or, those lenses. For example, Nikon Z9 or Canon R3 or R5 or Sony A1. Like Sony A1 do 50 frames per second, or 50 megapixel at 30 frames per second at 12-bit compressed RAW. That's how it achieve 30 frames per second. But again, 50 megapixel. In order to process 50 megapixel images 30 times in 1 second, you know how much raw processing power you need in order to capture the data, process it, apply the SNR firmware, not before that. Capture the data, convert into digital, because all these sensors are analog, and then convert into digital, then process using the SNR firmware, apply the noise reduction, and dump into the memory card. Not one, two memory cards if you are, shooting one plus or as a backup. So imagine all this process for one image. Even I didn't mention the autofocus calculation and autofocus, hunting and acquisition. So you are doing that from autofocus all the way to the memory card dump. You are doing this 30 times in 1 second. Okay, let's take this example to the extreme. Nikon Z9 can do 120 frames per second. 11 megapixel image. Imagine 11 megapixel, which is not as small, it's still too much. 11.5 megapixel exactly. So imagine you are having 4K resolution of, of movie which you split, you not combine those 120 frames of 4K video. You are basically just unstitch those images, and so every frame is an image. So, and every image has the first autofocus calculation, then autofocus acquisition, then image capture, then it converts into digital, then apply the SNR firmware to reduce the noise, color balance, or whatever the color profile you choose, and then dump into the memory card. And you're doing that 120 times in 1 second. You think that's easy? It's not easy. So if you are having 50 megapixel at 30 frames per second, or you are having 11 megapixel at 120 frames per second, these are the numbers which are staggering. These are engineering marvels which none of us think that it was possible before. Like 2-3 years ago, it was not possible before. We are into the digital era for last how many years? 20 years nearly, 15-20 years. So before, in last 15-20 years, do you think ever thought that we're gonna achieve these kind of numbers? Of course not. These are the engineering marvels. And the companies, all these companies, I'm not talking about only one company, all these companies are putting their best of the best engineering in order to achieve certain feature in their cameras to make them unique. So the price is going higher and higher for all this machine. Sony A1, $6,500. Canon R3, $6,000. The Nikon Z9, $5,500. All these cameras are like $500 apart from each other. So 6,500 Sony A1, Canon R3 $6,000, Nikon Z9 $5,500. You think the technology comes with at a cheaper rate? Of course not. It never did. It never will. People are complaining about the lower end camera, like entry level full frame camera, like Canon RP or Nikon Z5 or your A7, the first iteration of A7, the very first generation of A7. I'm talking about A7, not A7S, not A7R. No, A7. Those were, or A7, A7C, let's say A7C. These are entry-level full-frame cameras from Sony, Canon, and Nikon. All right. Again, all these are at a very cheap rate, but you are expecting that these cameras will perform like their top notch, like a Sony A7C will perform like Sony A1, or Canon RP perform like R3, or Nikon Z5 perform like Z9? Of course not. They will never perform like their top end brothers because they are low-end cameras. Their features are less. They are having less number of frames per second because they don't have the processor which is capable to handle this much amount of resolution, high resolution, uh, with the maximum number of frames per second. They can't handle that because the processor not only has to process the data from the sensor, before that it has to do certain autofocus calculation at the same time. So in order to do the autofocus calculation and then capturing the data from the sensor, converting to digital converter, analog to digital converter, then apply the SNR from there, then dump into the memory card, and then again apply the autofocus calculation for the next frame. All these things are happening in parallel. How much frames per second can an RP do? Like 3 frames per second. Nikon Z5 is like 4.5 frames per second, I believe. Sony A7C, I believe that's the one which got 10 frames per second. I don't know. I can't remember, but these are the lower tier cameras. And people think that they should perform like the top of the line, like Sony A7 or A7 III. A7 III is still a very, very, very good camera. Or Sony A7 II or Sony A7, they perform like A7 III? Of course not. Even in the same category of Sony A7, let's take example of Sony A7. People think that Sony A7 can perform Sony A7 Mark IV. Of course, it cannot perform like that. Big difference of technology, which evolved over the period of time. Take example of Z6, Z6 and Z6 II. Big difference. Z6 got one processor, Z6 II got two processors. Again, technology comes with price. In order to do certain calculations per second, you need more, better machine with better processing capability, better, power management in order to retain enough juice in the battery so you can, take more or same number of shots just like before. Again, technology comes with price. We as a user, we always, take this technology as for granted provided by all these company, and we think that, oh, if the camera is missing the autofocus, is the company is bad. Company is not making enough, you know, enough investment in order to make a good camera. Most of the time is the user's fault. I'm using Z5, which is the entry level full frame, cheapest full frame mirrorless camera from Nikon is around $1,000. All right, and Z9 is $5,500, so it's like 5.5 times of Z5. Like Z5 1,000, Z9 5,500, so it's like 5 times the price. So should I expect 5 times the performance of Z9? Of course, because it's the top tier camera. Z9, it can do 8K 60p, 120 frames per second at 11 megapixel, 60 frames per second with 20 megapixel, 45 frames per second, 38, with 30 frames per second raw, and 30 frames per second JPEG, 20 frames per second raw. And what Z5 can do? 4.5 frames per second only with compressed raw. There is not even an uncompressed raw option in Z5. Z6 II, 14 frames per second mechanical, uncompressed raw, 14-bit. Again, technology comes with price. Now let's go and jump into the those lenses, mirrorless lenses. 50mm 1.2S, the best 50mm from Nikon I ever used. It contains the technology which literally makes no sense. Sometimes the result that I have seen, like I shot with around 1 kilometer away an architecture building, and I was able to see very small details which I thought was not possible before. At the corner of the frames, not in the center, corner of frames. Again, so Nikon put the best technology in order to achieve certain number of resolutions per line. It means enough. The result from the lens is so sharp that it can resolve 100 megapixel even, maybe 200 megapixel. That 50mm 1.2S. You throw any number of pixels, and that lens is going to resolve this, because that lens is insanely sharp. Even at the corners, not on the center. Mostly what happens, the lens is centrally sharp, and the more you progress towards the edges, the more it loses its sharpness, contrast, and whatever. But that 50mm 1.2S is insanely sharp. Now it's over $2,200. Now the 85 1.2S announced is $2,700, and I'm expecting the same level of performance. That's like 50mm 1.2S. So Nikon put the best of the best when it comes to lens design or lens engineering into these lenses. 2470 2.8S, the best 2470 on planet. Canon 28 to 70 f2, engineering marvel. It's an expensive lens, but it's f2, 28 to 70. One of the best lenses out there. Insane zoom lens f2. Again, engineering marvel. Again, and engineering comes with price. Technology comes with price. And we think that no, the price of 28 to 70 should be less, under $1,000. Of course not. It never will. Sigma made 200 to 500 2.8. It's a very famous lens, and is most of you not even heard. Actually, I've never seen that lens. That lens is enormous, like literally a kind of a bazooka, big bazooka. It's so big. Sigma 200 to 500 f 2.8, not even f4, not even 5.6, 2.8, and it's very heavy. It's basically experimental lens, and it's very famous among the Sigma community or any telephoto, especially in the telephoto lens user community. That lens is very famous. Why? Because it's 2.8. Why Nikon and Canon never made it? Because from the user's perspective, you need you need monopod or sorry tripod all the time, and there's very less market for it, and it's basically portability is an issue of that lens. The usability of the lens is nearly impractical, but Sigma still made it just to say we made 2.8 at a f100 500 which they did. Normally we are having 500 f4 primes, 600 f4 primes, 800 5.6 primes. Those lenses are a piece of engineering marvel because the uh, the after their chart, what's this called? I'm sorry, I forgot the name of things. Their contrast chart is basically a straight line. It means that at any aperture value, these 400 2.8, 500 f4, 600 f4, 800 5.6, or 800 6.3 PF lens, all these lenses at any aperture value gives you straight line, means maximum contrast. Their autofocus motor is so snappy that if the pulse is crossing across the frame and you lock it, it immediately locks the focus. And some means if you are able to put your focus point on the bird, of the moving bird or the flying bird or bird in the air, you just press the earphone button and instantly the lens acquires the focus because of the autofocus motor is so fast on these lenses. That's why these lenses are so freaking expensive. 400 2.8 with 1.4 teleconverter for the Nikon Z mount is $14,000, and the same 400 millimeter at 4.5 aperture with nearly the same autofocus acquisition speed, that lens is only $3,200. So 400 2.8 with 1.4 teleconverter built in, that's $14,000, and the same 400 but instead of 2.8 it's 4.5 and it's lightweight and is small with nearly the same autofocus acquisition speed just like 2.8 is $3,200. See the difference? If the autofocus acquisition of these two lenses are the same, but we are not going to have the same aperture, that lens is 2.8, the other is 4.5. Again, technology comes with price. So people should not complain that, oh, the autofocus is missed by the camera. Technology comes with price. You are using Z5 or Canon RP or A7 III, and you are expecting their performance just like A1 or R3, R5 or Z9. Of course, they will never perform like that. They're never going to perform like that. Don't blame the camera. If you're using those low tier cameras, don't blame them. They are providing you enough features in a limited price bracket, which many of us can afford. Not everybody is lawyer or doctor or a businessman who can, spend thousands of dollars, as on their hobbies and still not professional. Not there's a very fraction of people are out there in the world who can do that or who can afford these expensive machines just as a hobby. Being professional, it's your need, but as a hobbyist, nah, I don't think so. So the whole idea behind this video is, if you whatever the machine that you are using, if it's not performing well, and if you think that machine is not enough and you start blaming the company, regardless if it's Nikon or Canon or Sony, you have to think twice that what tier machine you are using. Is a lower tier machine, mid tier machine, or top end machines. If it's the low tier or mid tier, then you shouldn't be complaining because these are built with limited functionality. That's why their prices are down. That's what makes us afford these machines. So we shouldn't expect the Z5 works like Z9 or Canon RP works like R3 or R5 or Sony A7C or A7 works like A1. We should not expect that. Actually, expecting to perform like these top tier machines by these low tier doesn't make any sense at the first place. So stop complaining and realizing what the machine is capable to do, and we must evolve and explore all the maximum potential of whatever the camera that we have. So we should operate these machines more efficiently than before. Once you know the limitation of your machine, that machine can do this, you start getting more and more better result. Like I'm using Z5 religiously in many occasions, and I know that Z5 cannot do sports action. I cannot take bird photography, bird in flight photography with Z5. I can't. I will better use D500 or D3S. D500 I prefer to use because that built for sports action wildlife, not Z5. For landscape, portrait, product photography, I immediately go with Z5 because I know that machine can capable to do. But for sports action wildlife, I'm never going to use Z5. I prefer to use D500 for sports action and wildlife because that machine is built for those kind of scenarios. I hope this makes sense to you, whatever I said in this video, and we start exploring our machines in a more efficient way in future to get the best out from it. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys in next video with some new content. Till then, take care.